Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on what I think will be another great episode of All Things Aviation and Aerospace. Each week I try to accomplish three things on this show. One is to provide engaging environment for for the participants and the viewers. Say that three times real fast. The second is to narrow the generation gap, or what I feel is the generation gap, between seasoned aviation and aerospace professionals and aspiring young aviation professionals. And third, inspire many of you out there who are interested in aviation and aerospace, but are not sure where to start, and also let you know the wide variety of opportunities that are available. That's really, the gist of what is trying to be accomplished by doing this show every week and having so many different types of guests on. And I really, and the part I enjoy the most is actually having the young people on who can ask questions and give perspectives from their being in high school, middle school, college, and that type of thing. So it's pretty cool to do that. We have a very special guest today, and he is a seasoned aerospace professional. He's currently the Vice President of Operations at Flight Research at the Mojave Air and Space Port out there in the Mojave Desert. We just had a really funny conversation because he's like, "Oh, it's pretty mild out here, actually. We're enjoying the weather." And I said, well, let's put that in perspective. What do you call mild? He said, "Oh, we're in the 90s. I said, "Yeah, okay. Sure. if being in the 90s is mild, then yeah, gotcha." So anyhow, for those of you who may not be familiar with the Mojave Air and Space Port out there in the Mojave Desert, it is a public use airport, but it's also known for flight testing and for space industry development. And it takes place it's being in a wide open, relatively unpopulated area that makes it doable for that. But it is also in close proximity to the infamous Edwards Air Force Base, who also does a lot of flight testing, et cetera, and different types of space development. So it's a perfect location, whether you like the heat or not. They absolutely don't get rain, but it's perfect location for that kind of aviation and aerospace activity. Anyhow, as I was saying, Scott Glaser is a Senior Vice President of Operations at Flight Research. And we're going to learn a lot about flight research during the show. We will also learn a lot about Scott's background. But to give you just a little taste of it, Scott has a Bachelor of Science and a master's degree in aerospace engineering from Penn State. I won't hold that against you about Penn State. And he has an MBA from the Quantic School of Business and Technology, as well as his doctorate in biomedical engineering from Drexel University. And that's just his education credentials. Scott's experience credentials include aerodynamic decelerator design and manufacturing engineering. He has tons of experience as a flight test engineer. He's been a flight controls engineer, and a few other things I'm probably sure he'll be sharing with us. Bottom line, if you want to learn how to safely get out of trouble using proven recovery techniques during a problematic in-flight situation, you definitely want to have Scott in the cockpit next to you. Scott Glaser, welcome to All Things Aviation and Aerospace.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you for the kind words. It's nice to be here.
It's great to have you here. I know you've been really, really busy, so appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us and tell us a little bit more about what you do and about flight research. Now, I'm going to take an extra couple of minutes because I got to tell you about this first young guest. We have three young guests on the show with us, and as you guys know that watch the show, I always try to do that. And I like the cross section I have this time, starting with a middle schooler. So I have Joshua Gibson. He is now in 8th grade. He's an 8th grade honors student at Julius West Middle School in Rockville, Maryland. Now, here's a story about Josh that's kind of fun to tell. So my kids went to the same school that Josh currently goes to, the same middle school. And back in the day, I was, on the board of the PTSA, Parent Teacher Student Association, which we used to just call PTA. And his mom was also on that. So I got to know his mom a bit, but it wasn't until years later that I ran into her in a grocery store, and she casually mentions to me when I asked how the kids are doing, she says, "Oh, Josh was fine. He's actually interested in aerospace engineering. And I kind of just gave her a dirty look because I was like, wait, you know that I live and breathe everything aviation, and you're just now telling me that your son is interested in aerospace? But I forgave her and I said, okay, cool. I'll keep in touch. And by the way, consider me now a mentor for Joshua about this industry. So a little time goes by, and we're coming up on the 100th birthday of Brigadier General Charles McGee, the infamous Tuskegee Airman, the iconic Tuskegee Airman. And we're coming up on his birthday and having an event for it. He's going to do some flying, et cetera. And we're having a luncheon. And I thought, this is a good way to introduce Joshua even further into the aviation realm. So I contacted his mom and I said, hey, do you think Joshua could go to this event? And, her first response was, well, it's on a school day. And, instinctively it was like, well, I guess I could take him out of school for a day, especially for something this important. But then being the mom she is, she said, well, no, he's going to have to ask permission because I'd like him to be able to do it and get, because of the significance of it, that he doesn't get docked the day of school. So she had him write an essay. Actually, it was just going to be a note. It turned into an essay, and turned that into his sixth grade administrator, because he was 11 at the time in sixth grade, his counselor, and his principal. Well, he did that, and needless to say, he got the day off for this significant event. But what was cool is when she sent a copy of it to me and I read it, I said, oh, wow, this is really impressive. He did a really nice essay about Tuskegee Airmen and about the general and everything. So I called her and I said, hey, do you think he'd be okay with, presenting this and reading it in front of the general and the people attending the lunch? And she just right there said, hold on a second, let me ask him. And she said, Joshua, will you do this? And initially he said no, but he thought pretty quickly, because like 5 seconds later he thought about it and thought, well, wait a minute, this is for a 100-year-old Tuskegee Airman, iconic. Yeah, I'll do it. And then he tells his mom, yeah, I'll do it, but I got to work on it. I want to tweak it a bit, So, and fast forward, he attended the luncheon with his mom, and he was there in his suit and everything, and stood up on stage and he made the presentation. He knocked it out of the park, blew the general away along with everybody else in the audience. And that was the beginning of something that started to propel his career interest further in terms of aviation and aerospace, because he was inspired by the whole thing. And it went with Brigadier General McGee's mantra of wanting to, it's something he talks about all the time, wanting to inspire the next generation, wanting to encourage the next generation to get into this industry and take it to the next level, which most of that has to do with space and that type of thing. So it really kind of kicked things off, and Joshua made a name for himself, so much so that he got attention of a number of people. And then as we were just talking about earlier, he went to the largest air show on earth, or air event, and that's at Oshkosh, EAA Air Venture at Oshkosh, the Experimental Aircraft Association, for those who are not familiar. Really big event, spent a week there, had a really good time, learned a lot. And now here he is sitting on All Things Aviation and Aerospace, hanging out with us in flight research. Joshua Gibson, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vince.
Glad to have you here. And I should mention that event was hosted by AOPA's National Aviation Community Center, and they did an amazing job putting that together for the general and all the things that went with it. So pretty cool. Plus, it was neat to see the general fly a couple of jets that day. So the next young man, which continues this whole thing of the excitement I have of having these young folks on the show, Isai Villanueva is a high school senior at Rex and Margaret Fortune Early College High School in Elk Grove, California. Now, Isai I met at Oshkosh also, and the reason I met him is because I was spending a lot of time with Brigadier General McGee, who was attending, the event, and there was an event in reference to a training aircraft, a Piper with a red tail on it, obviously significant to the Tuskegee red tail factor, and so I saw him being, having a chance to meet the general and being acknowledged with his accomplishment and I believe a scholarship. Tell us a little bit about that, et cetera. And so I saw his mom and I said, hey, can you give me a way to stay in touch with you guys? I'd probably like to talk with him later about being on the webcast. And she popped out a resume like any good mom would. But after learning more about him and contacting him for this show, I find out that Isai is actually he's got his glider pilot's license. And then 2 days ago, he passed his private pilot check ride. So he is now a glider pilot and a private pilot for, as he would say, single engine land, or as I would just say, he flies, single engine aircraft. And he's got 2 of his licenses already at the age of 17. And in addition to getting ready to graduate next year, he's a senior at the high school. He will also have 2 associate degrees, already getting his college stuff underway. So he has lots to tell us about that and a little bit more about his background and everything. But Isai, we're really glad to have you and welcome to All Things Aviation and Aerospace.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
It's great to have you here, and congratulations again on your achievement just the other day of getting your private. We all remember those first days when we solo, when we get our first ticket and things like that. So pretty awesome. And our third guest, I also met at Oshkosh and was actually at the doing my thing at the Airbus pavilion, and a young man came in who wanted to talk to their vice president, Airbus's vice president of research and technology, and Dad was kind of elbowing him on to just go up to her and start talking, and which he did. But while he was doing that, Dad popped a resume on me, and so I said, "Good, I'll touch base with Cody and also invite him as an opportunity to be on the show." Cody is a computer science major with an emphasis in AI, artificial intelligence, and data science. He's a senior at the Milwaukee Institute of Engineering in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He has a strong interest in aviation and aerospace and comes from a strong background with the experience of his dad, who's worked for years in the industry on the maintenance side, et cetera. So Cody, welcome to the show.
Having me, Vince.
Yeah. So as I said, I took a little long because I really wanted to tell you guys about these guys, because it's pretty impressive in terms of what they're doing, and really excited to have them on board. Scott, you have a really unique background and a very specialized background, and Flight Research is somewhat of a unique company, as I mentioned earlier. Can you just start out by telling us a little bit about who and what Flight Research is, what kind of things you do? You guys do, tell us about the cool stuff.
Well, that would be a long conversation. We only have an hour. I'm very fortunate to be a part of the team at Flight Research. It's a unique place in the world, both physically being at Mojave Air and Space Port, which is a mecca of aerospace history and achievement. Flight Research has been around since 1982. And in general, we do 3 things. We do flight testing, we do advanced pilot training, and we do aircraft maintenance and leasing support. So flight testing is some of the cool stuff we do. So we service customers across the board. Somebody brings us a widget, a box, a pod, something like that. They need it flight tested, either for civil certification or military applications, whatever. And we can either put it on our aircraft, we can fly their aircraft, whatever's necessary, and we execute that flight testing, to whatever the mission requirements are. We also provide support for those organizations. A lot of our customers maybe are smaller companies. They don't have their own flight test departments. They don't have their own flight test facilities. So they'll come to our facility and they'll use several of the areas that we have, whether it's hangar space or office space, airspace, whatever, to set up their flight test ops. And in those cases, some of those cases, we just give them a home, we say welcome, and we stand back and let them do their thing. In other cases, they don't have any flight testing capability, or their flight testing capability is maxed out. So they hand it to us and say, please test this component or this aircraft or whatever. So that's really a lot of fun. The other thing that we do is advanced pilot training. So that's everything from flight test training to upset recognition and recovery training. Vince, you referenced some of that in the discussion. And that's largely the public face of our company. That's something that our sales and marketing people go out and share with the world. And we are the world's leading provider of URRT. We recently signed a contract with Flight Safety International, if you're familiar with that organization, the largest civilian provider of aerospace training in the world. And we are their official upset training provider. We've partnered with them on that. Really rewarding work.
What's URRT you just mentioned?
Upset recognition and recovery training.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's airplane finds itself in a bad way, and pilots, training pilots how to deal with that. And we can go into that in a little more detail later if you want as to why that's important. But that's a large part of what we do. Sure. We also, in the training side, do spaceflight training. So both for spaceflight participants, the folks that are buying rides from Mr. Branson and Mr. Bezos, as well as for professionals, astronauts, engineers, program managers, all that kind of stuff. We do that sort of training. And then lastly, we have our own maintenance department, and we lease a lot of the aircraft that we have. Our maintenance department is second to none. We have a fleet of 44 aircraft of 22 different types that they manage. And a lot of those airplanes, while some of them are standard category airplanes, a lot of them are experimentals that these folks have to know like the back of their hand and do some really amazing work. I'm amazed every day at the work that our maintenance department does. So that's kind of flight research in a nutshell.
Yeah, it goes well with your background when I hear you describe it. So why don't you tell us a little bit, how did you even get into aviation? You have a kind of a cool story about that.
Yeah, it's certainly unique. I'll give you that. So I got my first airplane ride from my dad when I was 6 weeks old, as he tells the story, and from then it was
6 weeks.
6 weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
He had a Ryan Navy-on at the time. Actually, it was North American Navy-on to be precise. And yeah, so he gave my first ride. It was pretty much over from there. And my interest from the start has always been the whole idea of humans traveling through the air and space. So when we're in these vehicles, how those vehicles work, but how we interact with them. And everyone who flies knows that once you strap this vehicle on, because that's really what you're doing, it's not quite like putting on a seatbelt in a car. You are part of this vehicle and how that whole system works. So I didn't just want to be a pilot or want to be an engineer. I wanted the whole thing. So I got a couple of degrees in aerospace engineering from Penn State. I got a PhD in biomedical engineering from Drexel. It's really an aerospace physiology. They just didn't know what department to stick me in, so they put me in the biomed department. It seemed to work.
After all of your engineering experience, why did you want to add biomedical? Why did you want to add the physiology element to your
well, that's education? Us. That's the human part of it. What I found whenever we were doing engineering, there are folks that understand the vehicles, the spacecraft, the aircraft really well. And there are folks that understand humans as well as we can understand humans. It's actually, it's a difficult problem, obviously, because we're all very different. And there are some people that work very diligently to bridge that gap, but it's all kind of compartmentalized. And again, that's my perspective. And what really excites me is how they're really not separate. Whenever the vehicle is operating, they're not separate things. It's all one. and all those things have to be reconciled. And that's really, I don't want to say it's not done well, because there's a lot of great work that's been done by a lot of really fantastic people, but it's not as well understood as I think it can be, and as we need it to be moving into the future, particularly getting into where we're getting into with the air taxi services, the eVTOL, the Joby kind of things, and the sorts of things that that Cody's going to be working on if he gets into aerospace with regard to computer science and AI, where these things are flying themselves and the human is now out of the loop. But there's some very human things that these vehicles do, even though they're just machines, that we're going to have to compensate for, decision making and things like that, that are relevant, that really aren't that well codified.
Yeah, that's good that you brought that up, because that makes me want to ask you, Cody, how did aviation, besides the familiarity through your dad, but how did aviation really come to the forefront as something you want to pursue and apply your computer science background to?
Yeah, so I've participated in a lot of panels about AI and stuff, and I've noticed that most of the industries that are using AI is like in healthcare, manufacturing, and marketing and stuff, but I haven't really seen a lot of application, or at least from what I've been exposed to from the panels at my school and whatnot, I haven't really seen a whole lot of applications of it in the aviation industry. And I was kind of, and that kind of intrigued me a little bit to kind of dig deeper and find out maybe why or what solutions haven't been found using AI quite yet in the aviation industry.
AI is being actively pursued in aviation and aerospace. I'll let you speak to that, Scott.
Yeah, it is, again, in a lot of these autonomous functions and in weapons and things like that. You don't see a lot of it yet because it's not mature in the sense in the aviation industry. One of the things that you're up against when you enter aviation with a new technology is there's a much higher level of analysis and demonstration when it comes to safety. And so you've got this technology now that can think for itself. And the safety analysis folks and root cause analysis folks have no idea how to handle that. And I shouldn't say no idea. I'm being a bit unfair. They're working very diligently into figuring out, but it's hard whenever you don't have just a line for line cause effect sort of error chain that you can go back to and say, here's how things could fall apart. How do we mitigate that? And when you get to AI, that chain is a giant spider web that can do its own thing. And how do you ensure safety in something like that?
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
And aviation is also very traditional. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead,
Yes.
Scott. Or Cody.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So anyways, yeah, that's actually a really good point. And we actually talked about this in my deep learning class where we learned about neural networks and stuff, which basically is a way of simulating the human brain on a computer. And we talked about this idea that the bigger network you build, like the more complex it gets, you can't really trace it because there's just so many variables that are going on. Like there's millions of different things going on and it's impossible to trace. And that's kind of the frightening part about it, is that you can't really get down to a low level and tweak it to be absolutely perfect. You're only ever going to get to maybe a 99% accuracy when it comes to trying to predict some phenomenon or trying to get it to accomplish some goal, or at least that's how it is. That's how it is currently with the technology that we have.
Sure, but I'll tell you what, Cody, and I'll jump in here with this. There is an example of how it can be very effective and very positive, and Garmin has just shown that. Garmin has what's called an Autoland system. Autoland is not new. There are a number of the larger aircraft made by Boeing and Airbus, et cetera, that have Autoland systems in them as part of their autopilot technology. But the cool one about this that you guys can probably appreciate and relate to, this is in a small aircraft. This is in a Cessna 172 4-seat aircraft that can land itself if the pilot is incapacitated. And literally, if the pilot has a heart attack or a stroke or something and can no longer function, whoever else is in the aircraft, whether they're sitting next to him or in the back, can push one button on the system and it will take over everything. It will start communicating with air traffic control. It will take control of the airplane and set it up properly to make sure it's flying properly. It will comfort the passengers. This is when you get into the AI stuff, right? Actually tell the passenger, this is what's going on. Just, make sure your seatbelt is fastened, relax. I got this, so to speak. I don't think it says I got this, but anyhow, there's a few people I know that have had the opportunity. Joshua, you've met one. Pete Bunce, the president and CEO of the General Aviation Manufacturers Association, GAMA, he's had the chance to be in an aircraft and punch the Autoland and watch it and have to sit on his hands to not want to fly the plane. And then Tom Haynes from AOPA has done the same, and I've known some others that have also had that privilege of literally pushing that button and watching the plane take over, find the airport, and land and stop and shut down the engine and everything on its own. So we're heading in that direction of the technology, as both you and as Scott was saying. But there's a long road ahead to that. And to Scott's point, it really is more than anything, it's about safety. And it's what are the safety protocols necessary to keep things safe, whether you're talking about one pilot or talking about a plane full of people.
And I'll jump in with one other comment. I've been fortunate in working with a lot of different teams and a lot of varied industries. And what you find is that flight test in particular in the aerospace vehicle industry is very deterministic. You turn a switch, a light comes on. You have a certain aerodynamic profile and you expect a certain lift drag, so on and so forth, and you can measure that directly. Conversely, on the human side of things, the physiology side of things, when you talk about how the human brain works and cognitive processes and stuff, you can't do that because you'd have to stick probes inside somebody's head, and that hurts, and they particularly they don't appreciate that, and then it's hard to fly and all that kind of stuff. So it's largely statistics based. So particularly when you go to aerospace professionals, flight testers, to be very specific, and you start talking about statistics, they check out. They're like, statistics are useless. You measure it directly, and if it's not direct measurement, it's no good. And a lot of them have that attitude. But when you don't have any other choice, statistics is the solution, and it's proven somewhat successful, but not perfect. And that's where, again, going back to what Cody was talking about, these things that we are designing that are machines are not going to be able to be measured deterministically like that. We're going to have to use statistics to do it. And you're going to have to convince an industry that doesn't like statistics to rely on it. And that's going to be a challenge in the future. There's all these, again, that was the start of my earlier comment. Aviation has become very traditional. It used to be the leading edge, but now it's coming back to the point where it's always been done this way. And that's what keeps us safe, which also hasn't always been true. So that's some of the barriers that exist and some of the challenges that the folks on this call are going to be facing in the next few years.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. And I want to move into another area, but I did want to mention one other thing, and that is where AI is going to play, it's already playing and going to play a very important role in space exploration. Because being able to send something to the moon or to another planet and have it function pretty much on its own, autonomously, and do that effectively. We've seen that in a couple of recent situations. So the Mars Perseverance rover it was launched, and it had a long journey, almost 6 months or something like that, to Mars. And then they just had to wait and hope that it did everything right and land on Mars and not crash on Mars. But we all know it did do everything right. And then on top of that, they were able to launch the first helicopter out there, and that by itself was a scientific achievement. But again, all of this, so it's kind of a mixture, because it's like you send commands, a set of commands, and tell it what to do, and then you sit back and have to wait and see if it did it right. And by the way, that's a 20-minute delay to get that information. So, and they're
It sounds like,
doing
it
the
sounds
same
like,
thing.
sorry,
that?
that sounds like typical human interaction.
Yeah, that's
Ask it to
true.
do something, you give it about 20 minutes to see how it worked out.
Oh. Exactly. So, but I just wanted to mention that. I want to go to Isai. Isai, you have been very, very focused on aviation and aerospace in recent times. Actually, let me let you start out by telling us how aviation came into your world, because now it is your world. It's very clear with that. I saw your video of you flying the glider, which was really cool. Great video too, by the way. Must have been a GoPro. And then, you know, again, we talked earlier about the fact that you now have your private pilot's license for single engine land. So tell us how aviation came into your life, and then we'll take it a little further from there.
Yeah, so if I were to trace it back, it would have to be like a mix of influences. I just remember that ever since I took my first ride in a airliner airplane to some city that I don't remember, it was such a long time ago. I just knew that this is what I wanted to do, because it was just so much fun just looking down on the and seeing like a bunch of city lights and buildings just grow smaller and smaller and shrink further away. But fast forward to about middle school, they had there was like a high school fair to expose the middle schooler students as to what high schools they could possibly choose as they were getting closer to graduation. And I remember one of the high schoolers there had a ROTC program, which brought in a flight simulator that day. And they let me try it out. And then had just had so much fun trying to figure out the controls, even though I wasn't very good at it at the time. And ever since then, I was like, Mom, I really want to get into pilot training. And so we started looking for some scholarships. At the time, I was around 13 or 14 years old. So I was looking to see what I could do at the time. And that's how I came across glider pilots, because you can start your glider pilot's training when you're 14 years old. And since I was almost of age, I knew that's how I wanted to begin with. And so I got my license between 14 and 16. And then I passed my check ride for that on November 14th of 2020, when I was just a little bit over 16 years old. So as soon as that finished, I straight away moved on to the single engine land airplanes. And God willing, I hope to just continue with that mindset of just advancing my skills in aviation and my proficiency, and just seeing how far I can go.
Yeah, you were mentioning you really want to look at the options that you would have in the industry. And so while you're on a pilot track, you're not narrowing it to that and saying that's the only thing. You're kind of looking at everything, even in terms of where you go to school and what you study. It's obviously going to most likely be actually going to be, because you said aviation related, but you're still trying to figure that out. What questions do you have maybe for Scott, and in reference to flight research and his background, that might help you with working through that?
I think the main question I would have for Mr. Scott would be, like, how would what would be like the best route to get started to work for for the Flight Research Center? Like, and on top of that, like, are there any internships that can help like forward my progression towards a career that is potentially similar to yours?
Yeah, so there's not a clear path to what we do. What we do is very specialized, other than to follow your aviation addiction, which you've already started to do quite well. We have all of our pilots and engineers have a flight test background. Some have been astronauts. So we're very, very fortunate, again, in, I say flight research is one of the greatest places in aviation, and I don't say that because I work there. I work there because that's the case. So to get there, again, follow your passion, work your way up. We do have internships, so you can get my information from Vince. So please feel free to forward your resume. We just went through an internship cycle this summer, and again, follow what you're doing already. I will say your glider license is a huge help to flying airplanes. Without understanding the challenges with pilot training already, it's already expensive and takes a long time. Without those, notwithstanding those things, I think every pilot should get their glider license, because one of the reasons that we're in business doing advanced pilot training is modern FAA-based standard civilian pilot training doesn't teach airmanship anymore. It does not. You are already worlds ahead of the folks that are going through and going straight to a Cessna 172 at a university or whatever and going straight up the airline path. You're already a better pilot than some of those folks. I can tell you that if you can fly a glider. So that's great. Keeping your perspective open, as Vince said, to other degrees, not necessarily just the professional pilot degree. That's a great degree. Don't get me wrong. It's a good way to go. One of the things, I went through the engineering track. I never really had I never had a desire to only be an engineer. But one of the great things about engineering education is it teaches you problem solving, very, very critical problem solving. Sometimes it doesn't always teach you the best public speaking skills and interpersonal skills. That's you learn on the business side. But the engineering route is something certainly to consider in just in the general case of learning problem solving skills. My case, how I got here, I did a lot of things in parallel, right? I was an engineer, I was a professional engineer, but I was also working on my flying. I went the civilian track. I'm not military trained. Yet, in my current job, I fly F5s and stuff like that. I am weird in that sense that I've been fortunate enough to be able to do that. And how I did it, again, was doing these things in parallel. I did engineering here. I worked on my flying ratings, but I did some odd things. I bought a Yak 52. That's the short answer. Everybody asks how I got to fly these things. Like, well, it started when I bought a Yak 52. I got this weird Russian airplane, and it really, at the time, I was just out of college, and I knew I needed to get a commercial rating, an instrument rating. I wanted to work on aerobatics, complex, all that stuff. And the only airplane I could afford at the time was this weird Russian thing. So I found it, went out, bought one. And the really great thing about it, and what you will all find is the most important thing in your professional success in life, whatever it is people. It's the people that you find and that you interact with. And in this particular case, the group of people around the Yak 52 is all these former military, current military, professional aviators, really some of the best in the world, that just love to fly like we do. And they train anybody who's willing to learn in formation and tactical maneuvering and dogfighting and all these things that push a pilot's hand flying skills as hard as they can. And you just can't learn to fly an airplane better than that. And so I got involved with that group while I'm doing engineering, learning, how the F-22 flies and how 747 flies and how spaceships work and all that sort of thing, flying these airplanes, also doing physiology work and all that kind of thing. And just kept pressing forward. And anytime somebody asked me, hey, you want to go fly? Yeah. What time's the brief? When are we going? And that's the answer. It's like, well, you got to, let's go. And you got to be kind of relentless in that sense. And it all just kind of worked out. I had no idea that it would lead to where I'm at right now, which I'm very thankful for. I love my job and the people I get to work with. So I don't have a direct answer for you other than just be relentless in your passion and your dreams, and you'll find your way there. And it might be to flight research in Mojave, and it might be to some other place. I would love to have it be flight research. That'd be a great story to tell. But that's a long answer to a short question.
Yeah, and you know what? You bring up something that at the beginning and at the end of answering that question that is really important for you guys to all know, and that is every path is different. And you don't know, you can plan it out as best you can, but it will not quite end up the way it'll end up what you want to do, but it won't go the way you want it to. There's going to be some some turns and curves and a few roadblocks here and there that you'll be challenged with. But if you stick with your goal, as you know, Isai, from your meeting the general, he has the 4 P's. About one of them's perseverance. So you stick with your goal and keep going at it, then you'll accomplish what you want. As Scott said, flight research is very, very unique, but all of these aviation companies have different unique aspects to them. I mentioned before Garmin and talking about that with artificial intelligence, and you've got the SpaceX and some of the other companies I was going to mention that. So we saw Blue Origin take some people up in orbit and back, and no one was piloting the spaceship. On the other hand, we saw Virgin Galactic take some people up, and they did have somebody piloting. So there's just a lot of variations in there and that type of thing. I don't want to lose my time without having an opportunity for Joshua to chime in with us. I gave him a bit of a long introduction at the beginning, so I stole some of his time. But Joshua, how about telling us a little bit about your interest, in your words, about how you became interested first in talking about aerospace engineering and getting into aviation, and how that's all transpired.
I'm more so interested in the aerospace side of aviation. So I like rockets. I like seeing how everything works and comes together to go into space. Could you say the question one more time?
Well, I was just asking you to tell us a little bit how you became interested in it in the first place.
Oh, okay, thank you. I really became interested in it at school.
We lost your audio there for a second.
I really became interested at school since we were watching a lot of videos about aviation and aerospace, and it really just grew on me, and I wanted to learn more about it, so I read books, and it really affected me.
Okay.
So when I got invited to Mr. McGee's birthday party, and that's where I really got a taste of aviation.
Sure. Listen, your audio went down really low. It was fine, and now we could hardly hear you. Is there any adjustment you can do, or just kind of reset your laptop there?
I don't know.
Okay. All right, that's okay. I wanted to give you a chance to see if you had any questions for Scott with regard to flight research. I know you did your own research on flight research, so I wanted to see what questions you might have come up with.
Well, my biggest question was, what would aerospace training look like?
There's a lot of different aspects to aerospace training. So it sounds like your interest is specifically in being an astronaut. So to go from the 8th grade to being an astronaut, it starts with just your basic school classes and doing as best you can in those courses, particularly math and science. Obviously those are very important to the engineering side of it. And then going on to, if you want to fly as an astronaut for NASA, then you go on from there and get a degree in some STEM field, science, technology, math, something like that, so engineering. And they just, in the last round of applications, started requiring a master's degree. They didn't used to do that, but they do now. So plan on that as well. And any kind of flying training you can get helps with space flight training. There are a lot of parallels between flying airplanes and flying spacecraft. And if nothing else, it's just the idea that you're in this vehicle that's off the ground, and now time and cognitive abilities and things like that become very, very important. So even though the medium you're flying in, if you will, in an airplane is different than a spacecraft, still some of the timing and the criticality of things and the understanding is still very important. So that's an important thing. Any sort of activity like that that's intensive safety intensive scuba diving, things like that would be helpful to you to reach your goal of flying in space. Aerospace training in general is very broad. That's everything from learning how Isai's glider flies, and there's still glider development out there, sailplanes for Vince, or up to Elon Musk and SpaceX going to Mars, or Virgin Galactic and Spaceship Two taking passengers up. I spent about 4 years at Virgin Galactic, so I can tell you about that. So it's really what you want to make of it. Whatever you find interesting, you can chase down that path, and still be a participant in this great aerospace industry.
Scott, can you break it down a little bit about upset flight training? What's that like? Just to give us an idea of what somebody goes through. So, because you have experienced pilots that come through and take that training. So tell us a little bit about that and what it actually feels like, what's it like to do that.
Yeah, so upset recognition recovery training, or the FAA calls it upset prevention recovery training. So loss of control in flight is the number one cause of fatalities in aviation around the world, in every facet of aviation, commercial, business, private, whatever. And it comes from the fact that modern pilot training has gotten away from teaching basic airmanship skills. And we talked about this a few minutes ago. We were talking about Isai's glider training. And the idea is, in order to solve this loss of control problem, or at least get it under control, pun intended, is to improve pilots' skills in hand flying airplanes, particularly when they find themselves in a bad way. So this is dynamic maneuvering of jet aircraft. So if you find the airplane upside down, what do you do about it? One of the things as humans, we tend, whenever we're in stressful situations, we tend to revert to our first learned skill. And as pilots, if we're doing particularly FAA training, we find ourselves a little bit nose down. What does the FAA teach you to do? Roll wings level, pull the nose up, particularly pull the nose up. Well, if you get rolled by a wake and your nose is down and you're here and you're stressed or panicked, then what do? First learned skill, you pull. So what happens there is the airplane ends up doing one of these numbers. And if the airplane's not certified to do it, or you're too low to the ground or whatever, you end up either hurting yourself or killing yourself, and everybody on board, which is bad, obviously, right? That's what we're trying to avoid. So we're trying to instill these basic airmanship skills and how to maneuver an airplane in dynamic environments. It's not the same as aerobatic training. That's a common misconception. Aerobatic training is great training. I recommend everybody get it, but it's not the same thing. Aerobatic training is very, very scripted. So you're going to go out and you're going to do an aileron roll. So you go out and you hit a certain set of parameters and you push stick over, airplane rolls around. Same with loops and rolls and that kind of stuff. And if you take that to the next level in competition, now you're doing these very prescribed maneuvers, and you got all the judges, the American judge, the Russian judge, all that kind of stuff, just like the Olympics, and you get judged and all that kind of stuff. Great training, great event, don't get me wrong, but it's different than upset training. So we get commercial pilots, military pilots, you name it. We get the hurricane hunters, the folks from NOAA that go fly into hurricanes. They come out and train with us to learn what to do if they find themselves in a bad way in a hurricane. So even they recognize that there's some very specific training value to upset training. Yeah,
I have time for probably one or two more questions from each of you guys. So I'll go back to you, Joshua. Did you have any other questions or a follow-up question from what you just asked, Scott?
I have a question about AI and how it's affecting flight research, if it's helping you guys or if it's hurting you guys.
Oh, it's definitely helping, because it's such a new technology that the larger companies don't know how to deal with it. And that's one of the things that we do. Because we're a small, agile company, we can look at different different technologies, new technologies, and implement them and test them more rapidly than some of the larger organizations. So certain customer technologies I can't talk about, but some of the things I can, like for instance, The national campaign, which is NASA and the FAA's effort to figure out how all these air taxis, these eVTOL like Jobies and stuff like that, are going to work in the national airspace system. That test is going on at Edwards Air Force Base as we speak, which is right next door to our facility. So we're providing helicopters that act as surrogates for these vehicles and pilots that test pilots that are helping set up these test programs. And they are literally helping NASA and the FAA write the book on how these things are going to be certified and flown. Excuse me.
And that's huge.
Yeah, it is. We're very, very privileged and excited to be a part of that program.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, we're talking urban air mobility and the growth of that, and then the autonomous flight with these unmanned aerial vehicles, et cetera, and all of the combined for package delivery, et cetera, and integrating that into airspace that the rest of us are flying in.
Right.
Yeah.
And those vehicles run the gamut, because Joby's vehicle, at least in its first iteration, is going to be piloted.
Okay.
It's going to be very highly augmented digital flight controls, but it's still going to have a pilot. Whereas, so for instance, the WISC vehicle and Beta vehicle, they're autonomous out of the gate. They're saying, hey, here we come, and we're just going to turn this thing loose on the world. And it sounds funny to say, but it's true that there is a lot of reticence to letting these things fly around because people have seen the Terminator movies and things like that. And they're worried about these things going rogue and doing nasty things.
Well,
that's if nothing else, a perception problem. So
absolutely. But the good side of this is that it offers a lot of new opportunities career-wise for the next generation that's coming up in engineering and computer science and all the other aspects of STEM. And they're going to need some brainiacs to help figure this out and put it all together, because there will be a time when we will have this stuff in operation, which is why you guys are doing the testing, and FAA, et cetera, is trying to write the regs on it, the regulations. So,
and particularly in the aerospace side, because, if you look at other industries, you have mechanical engineers that cover cars and HVAC and, all this other stuff. It's very generalized. But even in engineering, you have aerospace engineering specifically for things that leave the planet. And now you're going to have these AI vehicles where you've got all these other things going on. You've got all these really highly complicated systems and computers and computer engineering, all that kind of stuff. But you still got to understand how the air works. You still got to understand orbital mechanics. You still got to understand all that stuff. And someone's going to have to bridge that gap. And my expectation is that's going to be a very specialized group of individuals that are able to speak all those languages at once and make it all work.
Absolutely. Isai, while we have a few minutes, do you have any other questions for Scott?
No, I don't have any more. Okay.
And Cody, how about you?
Yeah, so for this whole panel, we've talked a lot about AI, but Vince also mentioned that I specialize in data science as well, which is kind of a subset of artificial intelligence, where instead of creating some sort of solution to be able to solve a specific problem, data science kind of takes a look at data that, for example, flight research might have collected, and using the data science process, you could sort of look into different relationships between certain things that go on that the data has collected to discover new problems that maybe you guys didn't know about. And my question is, have you guys looked into any sort of data science, data analysis sort of problems within your company?
Yes, we have a customer that is testing a data science type capability on a new airframe, and that airframe. See how much I can say about this. So that system is a proof of concept system, and so they're putting it on an experimental aircraft we are the ones that are integrating that system onto the aircraft, getting it its airworthiness and getting it in the air for them. So again, that's where we kind of fit. We fit in this crossroads of all these things going on, and we bring that aviation expertise into these other industries. So that definitely exists, because basically the way we're designing these vehicles is we're trying to make the vehicle, whatever's controlling the vehicle, act like a human. I mean, that's what we're doing, because that's what we know. That's what we do across the board. Airplanes, we try and make fly like birds because we can't fly, but it's the same deal. So we make the cognitive process, the things that the computers are looking for, the same things that we would look for. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe we should be looking at other things, because Lord knows we're not perfect, but that's what we're doing. And again, that's going to be an interesting point. But yes, at Flight Research, we are involved in testing systems that use data science as minimum as a tool, if not more than that.
Very cool.
Cool. Listen, we're going to run out of time in a few minutes, so I wanted to give each of you an opportunity to give us an idea of what you have in mind for your future after you finish your education. What are your goals? I'll start with you, Isai.
So once I graduate from my high school with my diploma and 2 associate's degrees, I plan on taking this route that my particular high school offers. Since we're partners with Cal Poly, they offer 10 full ride scholarships to the senior classes every year. And I already got a verbal confirmation from my principal once I took him up on his first glider ride ever that I would be very, very high on the priority list to receive that. So
because you brought him back down alive?
Yeah, he came back down alive. Yeah. But
great principal going up with his student in a glider.
Yeah, the funny thing was he didn't apparently I forgot to tell him that my airplane was a glider, so it didn't have engine. So when he came to the airfield, he was really surprised that the airplane was so small and engineless.
He thought you were going to be getting in the tow plane, not with the motor, right? Not the glider.
Yeah, he thought I would have power, but he said regardless that he would have flown with me anyway. He had lots of fun.
That's good. So, and what do you want to do after you finish your college education? Do you have an inkling of what direction you might want to go?
I'm really thinking, honestly, I'm not too sure how it's going to play out. Like you said earlier, like I can plan so many things, but it's going to go like a certain way. But I'm thinking that it's going to be really heavily based on my hours, since I know my ultimate goal is to become an airline floor captain. And so I need to build up those 1,500 hours for the airline transfer pilot's license. And I feel like if I don't have enough hours by then, I'll probably think about getting my CFI rating and teaching other people. So then I can build up my hours to get to that point.
Gotcha. Good. How about you, Joshua? What do you, I mean, you're in 8th grade. You got a long road ahead of you, but you've been able to meet some really influential people in the industry, including Brigadier General McGee. So what do you think you're going to want to do with the experiences you've had as of late, including your time at Oshkosh?
As of right now, I'm interested in going into space, being an astronaut, but I don't know what I want to do. It can change. I'm just want to chase my interest, and today helped a lot.
Good, good. Cody, how about you? You're the grown one of the three.
Yeah, so actually currently, besides just going into my senior year, I'm currently looking for a full-time employment for after I graduate, specifically in the aviation industry. I hope to work with companies such as like Boeing or Airbus or Lockheed Martin. Just any big aviation company would be absolutely phenomenal. But aside from that, like the main reason I want to do that is because I want to get into somewhere where not only I can just apply my skills, but I can grow in my skill set and as a person. I want to be able to experience as much as I can, especially in the aviation industry, because it really interests me. And yeah, that's what I got so far. We'll see where life takes it though. So
awesome. I'll take it back to you, Scott, and let you, as I like to say, take us home. Any final words of advice for these young men in their future?
Yeah, you all are very impressive, and I look forward to your accomplishments and seeing your accomplishments into the future. I thank you, Vince, for the opportunity to talk to them today and for setting this up. This is a great opportunity that you all have working with Mr. Mickens, and just keep following your dreams, keep following your passions, work hard, and you'll get to wherever it is you want to be. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's the truth, man. I'm here. I'm living proof. Just keep sticking to it.
Well said. Gentlemen, it's been great to have all of you on the show. Young men, I'm quite proud of all three of you. I think you guys show great potential and promise in terms of what you want to do, and we'll all do well in your aspects and interests of the industry. But it was really cool to have you on here and to talk to someone like Scott. As Scott said, we probably could have done a 2 or 3 hour show to talk about all of the things that he has done and that he's currently doing with flight research. I even learned a couple of things about flight research today that I wasn't aware of. So really cool. This sounds like a really cool company. And even if you call being in the low 90s mild, well, so be it. We'll go with that. But you have clear skies a lot. So that's a severe clear is something we all as pilots like, right? Again, guys, thank you very much for being on All Things Aviation and Aerospace. I hope you all enjoyed the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
You guys take care. My name is Vince Mickens with All Things Aviation and Aerospace, weekly webcast where we talk about the opportunities in the industry with seasoned industry professionals and some of the young people either about to get into the industry or have just started and are at the early stages of their career. So to our viewers and listeners, thank you very much for joining us. Catch you guys next week. Have a good one.